when my daughter-in-law stood in the doorway of my nursing home room, watching me fold my last sweater into a box, and calmly said, "We need the space, so we're clearing out the house." It felt like someone had quietly erased my whole life with a single sentence, and I realized that to her, my memories, my furniture, even my favorite chair, were just obstacles in the way of whatever came next. If you're watching this, tell me in the comments where you're from. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe, because I'm going to tell you exactly how I went from a woman who thought she'd die in her own living room to the old lady packing her things in a nursing home, and why, after what she said, I decided to sell the house myself and change everything. So let me take you back to the beginning and show you how it all really started. I still remember the weight of my house keys in my hand that morning. They had been on the same brass ring for over 40 years, smooth and warm from use, like old coins. I used to joke that if you shook my purse, you'd hear my whole life rattling in metal. But that day, my son Daniel didn't laugh. "Mom, just for now," he said, holding out his hand. "It's safer this way, until we figure things out." "Figure what out?" I asked, though I already knew. At 78, widowed and moving slower, I had become a topic they discussed in whispers. Stairs were dangerous, the kitchen was a risk, and my beloved garden, my pride, was too much work for you now. I wasn't reckless. Yes, I'd fallen once. In the driveway on a patch of black ice I hadn't seen. I'd bruised my hip and my pride more than anything else. But for my son and his wife, Amber, that single fall turned into a story they repeated until it sounded like I rolled down the whole street. "Mom, we worry," Daniel said. Amber stood behind him, arms folded, lips pressed tight in what she probably thought was a caring smile. She had that way of looking at me like I was another task on her never-ending list. Soccer practice, meal prep, aging mother-in-law. "Your reflexes aren't the same," she added, "and you get confused sometimes." Confused. I wanted to argue, but I'd forgotten the name of a neighbor's granddaughter the day before, right in front of them. The word hung in the air, like a stain I couldn't scrub out. Daniel's hand was still out. I stared at the keys, at the house visible through the window behind them, the porch swing where my late husband used to drink his coffee, the maple tree we planted when Daniel was born, the curtains I'd sewn myself. If I refused, I'd be difficult. If I agreed, I'd be cooperative. Either way, their plan would roll forward. My fingers opened slowly. The keys dropped into his palm with a small final clink. The sound was so soft, but inside my chest, it echoed like a door slamming shut. "Thank you, Mom," he said, as if I'd done something noble. Amber stepped forward, her voice bright, too bright. "You'll see. This will be good for you. The nursing home has activities, other people your age, professional staff. It's better than rattling around here alone." Better for whom, I wondered. But I didn't say it, because I could already feel how outnumbered I was. They had their phrases: safety, liability, peace of mind. All I had was an ache and a house full of memories nobody else seemed to value the way I did. When Daniel tucked the keys into his pocket, that was when something shifted in me. I didn't recognize it at first. It felt like shame, but beneath it was something sharper, more solid, a thought. This is still my life. I went along with the plan because I was tired, because grief had worn me down since my husband died, because sometimes it's easier to let the current drag you. They moved me into the nursing home temporarily, while they sorted the house. But when Amber came weeks later and said, "We need the space," everything that had been simmering quietly inside me began to boil. And that's when I started thinking, really thinking, about the one thing they seemed to have forgotten. The house was still in my name. The nursing home wasn't awful. That's the best thing I can say about it. It smelled of disinfectant, mashed potatoes, an air freshener that tried too hard to smell like flowers. The lobby had 2 plastic ficus trees and a big TV mounted on the wall, always tuned to either news or game shows. People shuffled past in slippers, pushing walkers or being pushed in wheelchairs, like slow-moving boats on a carpeted river. My room was small but tidy. A single bed, a dresser, a recliner, and one window facing the parking lot. They let me bring a few things from home: my quilt, some framed photos, a lamp my husband had rewired himself. But most of my life was still back at the house, stacked in boxes, waiting. Temporarily, they kept saying. The staff were kind in that professional way that's equal parts real compassion and routine. Nurse Kelly called me Ms. Elaine and always asked about my garden, even though she'd never seen it. "You had roses?" she'd say, taking my blood pressure. "3 kinds," I'd reply. "And peonies. They're probably blooming now." That thought hurt more than I liked to admit. My body was in room 214, but my mind was still walking the uneven stones between my flower beds, bending down, touching leaves, talking to myself the way people do when they've spent too many years in one place to pretend they're not attached. Daniel visited twice a week at first. He'd sit on the chair by the window and tell me about work, about the kids' schedules, about traffic, city talk, distracted talk. "How's the house?" I'd ask every time. "We're going through things," he'd say. "You had a lot of stuff, Mom." Stuff. My wedding dress. His baby clothes. The letters my husband wrote me when he worked night shifts and couldn't sleep. Stuff. "What about the garden?" I'd press. "We'll figure it out," he'd say, already glancing at his phone. Amber came less often. When she did, she brought the children who were always half bored or half curious. My granddaughter Emma would climb onto my bed, careful not to disturb the call button cord, and show me videos on her phone. One afternoon, while Emma scrolled, Amber walked slowly around my room, looking at the photos I'd placed carefully on the dresser. "You know," she said, "it might be good to clear out more of your things. You don't really need all this here, right?" Her tone was light, but something about the way her eyes moved bothered me. She wasn't seeing memories. She was seeing clutter. "I like my things where I can see them," I replied. She smiled, thin and polite. "Of course, just thinking ahead." Thinking ahead to what? I didn't know. At night I lay in bed listening to the distant beeping of monitors, the squeak of carts in the hallway, and the occasional moan of a confused resident. The ceiling above me was textured in that way that makes patterns if you stare long enough. I'd trace shapes with my eyes and think about my kitchen ceiling instead, about the spot above the stove where steam had slightly discolored the paint. The social worker, a woman named Denise, came by one morning. "How are you adjusting, Elaine?" she asked, clipboard in hand. "I'm here," I said. "I miss my home." She nodded in that trained, empathetic way. "It's normal to grieve your independence, but you're safe here, and your son really seems to care." I didn't doubt that Daniel cared. That was what made everything so complicated. He loved me, but he also loved convenience, and Amber loved order. I was starting to suspect that to her, I was a loose thread in the fabric of their well-organized lives. Days blurred together. Bingo, physical therapy, lunch trays, TV in the common room. Sometimes I caught myself slipping into the routine, almost comfortable. Then one Wednesday afternoon, Daniel called instead of visiting. "Hey, Mom," he said, sounding rushed. "I'm not going to make it in today. We're doing some heavy lifting at the house. Amber's going through the attic. We're trying to get the guest room set up properly." "The guest room?" I asked. "Yeah, you know, we need the space." Need the space. The phrase stuck with me for days, turning over and over in my mind like a stone in a pocket. Space for what? For whom? I began to feel something harden inside me. I'd given up my keys, my routines, my garden, because they said it was temporary, for my good. But the more I listened between their words, the less temporary it sounded. And that's when I started making notes. Little lists on the back of napkins. Who owned what? Account numbers I remembered. The name of the attorney who handled our mortgage years ago. I might be living in a room with plastic plants and scheduled bingo, but my mind, confused or not, still knew this. Nothing truly permanent had been signed yet. It happened on a Sunday. The hallway still smelled like syrup from the pancakes they'd served at breakfast. I was folding clothes on my narrow bed, carefully, slowly, because in the nursing home, you learn to stretch out tasks so the day doesn't feel so empty, when there was a knock on the door. "Come in," I called. Amber stepped inside alone this time. No children, no Daniel. She wore leggings, an oversized sweater, and that headband she always used when she was doing serious cleaning, as she liked to say. "Hi, Elaine," she chirped. How are you feeling? About the same as last Sunday, I replied. And the one before that. She gave me a tight smile and glanced around my room. Her eyes lingered on the half-packed box on the chair. I was sorting my winter clothes, deciding what I actually needed. That's good, she said vaguely. You look settled. I didn't feel settled. I felt like a book someone had taken off a shelf and left open face down for later. Is Daniel with you? I asked. Her expression flickered. He, stayed at the house. There's a lot to do. There it was again. The house. Always. A lot to do. She took a deep breath, then sat down on the chair by the window, smoothing her sweater nervously. For the first time in a long while, she seemed unsure of herself. I wanted to talk to you about the house, she said. My hands paused on the sweater I was folding. Suddenly the soft hum of the air conditioner, the faint sound of a TV from a nearby room, all seemed to grow louder. What about it? I asked. Amber clasped her hands together. So, we've been trying to organize everything. The kids are growing and we're tight on space. The boys are sharing a room. Emma's got her own, and the guest room is full of your things. My things, I repeated. She nodded. And we've been looking at the layout and, well, we need the space. There it was, the phrase that turned me from a person into a problem. We need the space. She said it so simply, like it was a neutral fact, like the weather. For what? I asked quietly. For life, you know, she replied. A home office, maybe. Storage. A place for the kids to have friends over. Daniel is thinking of setting up a treadmill. We're just outgrowing the house the way it is. I held her gaze. It's a 4-bedroom house with a basement and a garage. She blinked. Well, yes, but you'd be surprised how quickly it fills up. With your things and ours, it's just a lot. And honestly, paying utilities and taxes on a place that's not really working for us as a family, I heard the word she didn't say. Waste. So, she continued, we've been talking to a realtor. My chest tightened. A realtor. Just exploring options, she said quickly. Nothing final yet, of course. We'd never do anything without talking to you. But realistically, selling the house could help cover your nursing home costs, and we could downsize to something more manageable for us. Everyone wins. Everyone. I pressed my palms into the bedspread to steady myself. Amber, I said slowly, the house is paid off. Your father-in-law and I spent 30 years paying that mortgage. It doesn't cost you a cent in rent. It costs time, she replied. Maintenance, upkeep, insurance. And as you know, nursing homes aren't cheap. Daniel's under a lot of pressure. The guilt arrow. Always aimed at Daniel, but it landed squarely in my heart. I don't want to be a burden, I said, more to myself than to her. Her expression softened, subtly triumphant. Of course you don't. You raised Daniel to be responsible. This is just the responsible thing. Using the house to support your care. You're not living there anymore, and we really do need the space. She said it again, as if repetition made it kinder. I looked at her carefully. She wasn't a villain. She was practical, efficient, and tired. I could see the dark circles under her eyes, the way she kept flexing her fingers as if they were sore from work. She probably did believe what she was saying. But sitting there, in that bed that wasn't mine, in a room that wasn't home, I realized something important. They had all mentally moved on from the idea of me ever living in that house again. The only one who hadn't moved on was me. So you came to tell me you're selling the house? I asked. She hesitated. Well, we'd need your signature, of course, but yes, that's the direction we're heading. I nodded slowly. I see. And in that moment, something in me went very calm. Not defeated, clear, like when a storm passes and you can finally see how much damage has been done. Amber, I said quietly, thank you for telling me. She brightened, relieved. So you understand? Oh, I understand very well, I replied. Better than you think. She didn't know that in my nightstand drawer, under the box of tissues, I had an old folder with copies of the deed, our will, and the name of a lawyer I trusted. She also didn't know that just because I was in a nursing home didn't mean I'd surrendered my rights. When she left, she patted my hand. We'll bring the papers in a few days, okay? To make it official. It's really for the best. After the door closed, I sat there for a long time, feeling the steady thump of my heart in my chest. We need the space, she had said. Fine, I thought. If space is what they want, I'll give it to them. But not in the way they expect. I didn't tell anyone my plans at first. Not Daniel, not Amber, not the nurses. I started with the phone. The nursing home's lobby had a small sitting area with a public phone mounted on the wall. Most residents used it to call grandchildren or argue with insurance companies. I used it to call a number I hadn't dialed in years. Law offices of Harris and Cole. This is Megan, a young voice answered. Hello, dear, I said. May I speak with Mr. Cole? Tell him it's Elaine Walker from Maple Street. There was a pause. One moment, please. A few clicks. Then a deeper voice came on. Elaine, is that really you? Still breathing, I replied, and still very much in my right mind. So I hope your next available appointment is soon. He chuckled, then sobered when he heard the edge in my tone. What's going on? I'd prefer to discuss it in person, I said. Can you meet me somewhere near Greenview Nursing Home? I'm not exactly driving these days. We arranged to meet 2 days later at a coffee shop a block away from the facility. I signed out at the front desk, telling the nurse I was going for a walk with a family friend. It wasn't entirely a lie. Mr. Cole had known my husband and me for years. The air outside was cool, with that faint smell of exhaust and cut grass that always makes me think of early spring. Walking was slower now, each step deliberate, but it felt good to be outside without someone hovering over me. The coffee shop was one of those modern places with big windows, exposed brick, and baristas who looked like they were all in a band together. I spotted Mr. Cole at a corner table, gray-haired now, thicker around the middle, but still with the same kind eyes. Elaine, he said, standing to hug me. You look, well, I look old, I corrected him. Let's not waste time pretending otherwise. We sat. He ordered us coffee, decaf for me, at his insistence. So, he said, leaning in, what's happening? I told him everything. The fall, the move, the keys, the temporary stay that didn't feel temporary at all. Amber's visit, the phrase, we need the space, the realtor. He listened quietly, occasionally jotting notes. And the house is still in your name only? He asked. Yes, I said. We refinanced once after Daniel moved out, but we never changed ownership. My husband and I talked about adding Daniel, but we decided to keep it simple. He nodded. And you're mentally capable of making decisions. No guardianship, no power of attorney signed over? Not a thing. He tapped his pen thoughtfully. Elaine, you're in a strong position. They can't sell that house without your consent, and you are under no legal obligation to use your assets to pay for anything beyond what you choose. You have options. I took a sip of coffee, my hands only slightly trembling. Such as? Selling the house yourself, he said, on your terms. Putting the money somewhere safe, updating your will, maybe setting up a trust. You control what happens, not your son's convenience or your daughter-in-law's storage needs. Would that hurt Daniel? I asked, the question that had been gnawing at me. He hesitated. Financially? Possibly, depending on what you decide. Emotionally? That depends on how much he's been relying on your house as part of his plan instead of his own work. But you're not responsible for the fact that they were counting on something that doesn't belong to them. I thought of Daniel carrying boxes out of my attic like he was already the owner, of Amber's casual assumption that the house was simply there, waiting to be converted into her ideal floor plan. Could they challenge it? I asked. Only if someone claimed you were incompetent when you made the decision, he said, which is why I wanted to see you in person. You know who you are, where you are, what you own, and what you want. I'd testify to that. I smiled. So I'm officially not crazy. Not even a little, he replied. Angry maybe. Hurt, definitely. But sane as ever. We went over the details. Appraisal, listing, timelines. I told him I didn't want any of this to look like a secret betrayal, even though I knew that's how they might see it. So tell them, he said. But only after the papers are in motion. You're not sneaking, you're protecting yourself. On the way back to the nursing home, I walked slower, not from weakness, but from thinking. The world felt slightly different, sharper. Inside, Nurse Kelly noticed. You look lighter, she said. I just remembered something important, I replied. What's that? That I'm still the one writing the last chapters of my story, I said. Not my daughter-in-law, not even my son. That night, Lying in my bed in room 214, I stared at the textured ceiling again. The shapes looked different now, less like clouds drifting, more like a map. I traced an invisible path with my eyes. Lawyer, realtor, signatures. If they wanted space, I was about to give them more than they ever bargained for. The official steps moved faster than my family ever had with any of my needs. Within a week, Mr. Cole had arranged for an appraiser to visit the house. Another week, and we had a recommended listing price. The market, he said, was hot. My little Maple Street home, with its creaky stairs and worn kitchen cabinets, was suddenly some investor's dream. The irony wasn't lost on me. He came to the nursing home one afternoon carrying a neat folder. We sat at the small table by my window, usually reserved for jigsaw puzzles and crossword books, and turned it into a legal desk. "These are the listing documents," he explained. "You'll authorize my office to handle the sale on your behalf. You remain the sole owner. The proceeds go into an account in your name. We'll talk about estate planning once we see the actual number." The papers looked both ordinary and monumental. Printed words, blank lines for signatures, places to initial. I'd signed a marriage certificate, a mortgage, a birth certificate, life insurance forms. Now I was signing away the house that had held all of that. "Are you sure about this?" he asked quietly. I thought about the way Amber had said, "We need the space." Not, "We'd like to help you decide." Not, "What do you want, Elaine?" Just a statement like it had already been decided. "I'm sure," I said. "If my home is going to be sold, it will be because I chose it. Not because someone pushed me out of it and then treated it like a storage problem." He nodded. "Then sign here and here." My hand shook a little, but my signature was still recognizable. I felt oddly proud of that. When we finished, he gathered the papers carefully. "I'll keep you updated every step of the way," he promised. "Showings, offers, everything." "Thank you," I said. "And Mr. Cole?" "Yes? If my son calls you before I talk to him, don't lie. But don't let him bully you either." He smiled faintly. "Elaine, I've dealt with aggressive adult children before. You'd be surprised how many think their parents' assets are theirs by right. I know which client I represent." After he left, I sat for a long time, staring at the now empty tray table. It felt like I'd just done something huge and also completely invisible. No one in the hallway knew that a house's fate had been decided in room 214 over lukewarm coffee and a ballpoint pen. A few days later, Daniel visited. He seemed distracted but cheerful. "How are you, Mom?" he asked, kissing my cheek. "Busy," I replied. "More than you think." He laughed, not really listening. "The kids say hi. They couldn't come today. Homework, you know how it is." I watched him talk, my heart a mess of love and resentment. This was my boy, the one I'd sat up with through fevers, the one I'd driven to early morning practices, the one who used to slip his hand into mine at the grocery store without thinking. "Any news about the house?" I asked. He shifted. "Actually, yeah. We've been talking to a realtor. He's coming by tomorrow to look it over and give us a price range." I raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" "Yeah," he said, oblivious. "It's about time we make things official, right? It's just sitting there. We need the..." He stopped, maybe remembering how Amber's words had sounded when she said them to me. "Space?" I finished. He winced. "I didn't mean it like that. It's just logical." I looked at him for a long moment. "Daniel, has it occurred to you to ask me what I want done with my house?" He shifted in the chair, uncomfortable. "Mom, you're not living there anymore, and the nursing home isn't free. Amber and I are trying to do what's best for everyone." There it was again. Best for everyone. I took a steady breath. "Daniel," I said, keeping my voice calm, "what's the name of your realtor?" He frowned. Thompson." "Why?" "Because when he shows up tomorrow," I said, folding my hands in my lap, "he's going to find out the house is already under contract with a different office. Mine." His face drained of color. "What?" "I've hired my own attorney. The house is listed as of this morning. I am the seller. Not you. Not Amber. Me." He stared at me, mouth slightly open. For a moment I saw the boy he'd been, caught doing something he shouldn't, torn between denial and confession. "Mom, why would you do that without talking to us?" he asked. I met his gaze evenly. "Why were you talking to a realtor without talking to me?" He opened his mouth, then closed it again. You assumed, I said quietly. You assumed that because I'm here, in this bed, walking slower, needing help, that my decisions no longer mattered. You decided what was best for me without actually asking me what I wanted. So I decided what was best for me on my own. He rubbed his forehead. Amber is going to freak out. I imagine she will, I said. But this isn't her house to freak out about. The room felt charged, like the air before a storm. Mom, he said slowly, what are you going to do with the money? That was the question, wasn't it? The one that revealed what had really been under all this concern and talk of responsibility. I haven't decided fully, I replied. But I know this much. It won't be used as an excuse to treat me like a piece of furniture that needs to be moved for better flow. He stood up abruptly. I need to talk to Amber. I'm sure you do, I said. After he left, my hands trembled. Not from age this time, but from adrenaline. Standing up to your child at 78 feels a lot like standing up to your parents at 18. Terrifying and necessary. On my nightstand, the folder from Mr. Cole sat neatly where I'd placed it. I rested my hand on it and whispered, half to myself, half to the absent walls of my old house. I'm not done yet, I said. 2 weeks later, Mr. Cole called with news. We've got an offer, he said. Full asking price. Cash. Cash? I repeated. Investors, he said. They want to rent it out. They're willing to close quickly, assuming there are no title issues. I've already reviewed everything. It's clean. I sat on the edge of my bed, gripping the phone. Full price. Quick close. My house, the one I dusted and scrubbed and decorated for decades, was about to become someone else's investment property. How do you feel? He asked. I feel like I'm selling a part of my body, I said honestly. But if it has to go, I'd rather cut it off myself than have someone else do it while I'm asleep. He was quiet, then said gently, You don't have to accept, but from a practical standpoint, this is a very good offer. I thought of the creeping dread I'd felt when Amber said, We need the space, the feeling of being pushed aside, the fear that I'd be left with nothing, not my home, not my dignity. Let's accept, I said. He went over the next steps. Closing date, wire transfers, tax implications. It all sounded like another language, but underneath it, I could hear the translation. Control, choices, leverage. Word reached Daniel and Amber faster than I expected. Daniel showed up at the nursing home that evening, eyes red, jaw clenched. He didn't knock, just pushed open my door. Why, Mom? He demanded. Why would you do this without us? I put down my book carefully, marking my page. I didn't do it without you, I said. I did it because of you. Amber stood behind him, arms crossed, face tight. We had a plan, she said. Yes, I replied calmly. You had a plan. I was the subject of it, not the author. Daniel paced the small room. You blindsided us. I had ideas for renovations. We were going to maybe knock down a wall, fix the kitchen. Now we have to move? We can't afford to buy another house right now. Something inside me clicked. There it was, the unspoken truth. You were counting on my house, I said quietly. Not just for space, but for your future, without ever asking me if that's what I wanted. He stopped pacing and looked at me, eyes wounded. We thought you'd want to help. You always have. I swallowed hard. Daniel, I have helped. My entire adult life has been helping you. But there's a difference between helping and being harvested. Amber scoffed softly. That's dramatic. I turned to her. Do you know what it feels like, I asked, to hear your daughter-in-law talk about your life's memories as stuff and your home as wasted space? To be told, while you're sitting in a borrowed bed, that they're already planning how to repurpose the rooms where you raised your child. Her face flushed. I didn't mean it like that. Maybe not, I said. But that's how it landed. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. What are you going to do with the money, Mom? Just let it sit. You don't need that much in a nursing home. There it was again. The assumption that my resources existed to serve their needs. I'm going to talk to my lawyer and make a plan, I said. Some will go toward my care, yes. Some might go into a trust for my grandchildren with conditions. Some might be reserved so I can choose where I live and how, instead of having it decided for me. The point is, I will decide. He sank into the chair by the window, looking suddenly exhausted. I feel like you don't trust us. I took a deep breath. I trust that you love me, I said. I do not trust that you see me as a person with rights anymore. You see me as a problem to solve, and that's not entirely your fault. Our whole culture tells you that old people should be grateful for whatever scraps of independence they're given. Amber's eyes glistened, but she didn't speak. I'm not punishing you, I continued. I'm protecting myself. There's a difference. The room went quiet. Finally, Daniel whispered, We're going to have to move. I'm sorry that's hard, I said honestly. Truly, but I never promised you my house. I promised you love, support, and a home while you were my responsibility. You're not a child anymore. He looked like he wanted to argue, then just sighed. I need time to process this. So do I said. They left without hugging me. That hurt more than I expected. I sat there after the door closed, staring at my hands, these hands that had signed away a deed and also held my son when he was less than a day old. You don't stop being a mother just because you start protecting yourself. But it feels different, heavier. That night I didn't sleep much. Not because I doubted what I'd done, but because loving someone and disappointing them at the same time is its own special kind of ache. The house closed a month later. The nursing home administrator called me into her office to go over the updated financial situation. She wore a professional smile, but I could see the curiosity in her eyes. Not many residents had large sums of money land in their accounts. Mrs. Walker, she said, with these funds, you have several options. You can remain here privately funded for quite some time, or you could explore other living arrangements if that's something you'd like. Other living arrangements. The phrase lit something inside me. What kind of arrangements? I asked. She listed possibilities. Assisted living apartments, independent senior communities, in-home care if I moved back somewhere less stairs-heavy. For now, I said, I'd like information on independent senior communities. Real ones. Not just places where you park old people and play old music at them. She smiled genuinely at that. I know a few good ones. Places where they treat residents like adults, not patients. Over the next few weeks, pamphlets and brochures appeared on my tray. Photos of airy apartments, shared gardens, art classes, walking clubs. Not a magic solution, but something that looked a little like dignity. I took my time. I asked questions. I had Mr. Cole review contracts. For the first time since my husband died, I felt like I was planning something for myself, not just being carried along by circumstances. Daniel visited less often during that period, but when he did, he was quieter, more careful with his words. One day, he sat on the edge of my bed and said, We found an apartment. Oh? Yeah, smaller but close to the kids' school. We'll make it work. There was no accusation in his tone, just tired acceptance. I'm glad you found something, I said, and I meant it. He hesitated. Mom, about the house. I've been angry, but I've also been thinking. We really did act like it was ours before it ever was. I'm sorry. The word hung between us, fragile. I'm sorry too, I replied, that it came to this, that I didn't speak up sooner, that I let things build until I felt like I had to fight you instead of talk to you. We sat in silence for a moment. Emma asked if she can see the house one last time before the new owners move in, he said. My throat tightened. I'd like that too, I said. Mr. Cole arranged it. One afternoon he picked me up and drove me to Maple Street. The house looked smaller than I remembered, as places often do when you return after time away. Emma met us there, her hair in a ponytail, eyes wide. Grandma, she said, hugging me. It's weird seeing it like this. The rooms were empty, echoing. No furniture, no pictures on the walls, just scuff marks and nail holes and faint outlines where bookshelves had once stood. I walked slowly from room to room, my cane tapping on the hardwood floors. The kitchen where I'd cooked countless meals. The hallway where we'd marked Daniel's height each birthday. The window seat where I used to read on rainy days. In the master bedroom, I stood at the window and looked out at the maple tree. Still there, branches thicker, leaves rustling in the breeze. You okay, Grandma? Emma asked softly. I nodded. I'm saying goodbye. She slipped her hand into mine. I'm glad you sold it yourself, she said suddenly. I looked at her, surprised. You are? Yeah, she said. Mom was really mad at first, but I heard Dad tell her that you had every right. He said he didn't want us to think we were entitled to stuff just because someone is old. He said it was a lesson. I smiled faintly. Your father's a smart man when he slows down long enough to think. Later, standing on the front porch one last time, I reached into my purse and pulled out a key. Not to this house, that set had already changed hands, but to a small apartment in an independent senior community across town. Bright, one level, with a balcony big enough for potted plants. New home? Emma asked, seeing the key. Yes, I said. Smaller, but mine. And this time, everyone understands that. She grinned. Can I help you plant new flowers? Tears pricked my eyes. I'd like that very much. People think I sold the house out of anger. I can see it in their eyes when the story gets around. The old lady who got mad at her daughter-in-law and sold the family home out of spite. They're wrong. I sold the house because of the moment I sat on a narrow bed in a nursing home, while my daughter-in-law told me almost casually, we need the space. Not, we're worried about you. Not, how can we make this work for everyone? Just, we need the space, as if my life's history was a storage problem and my absence was an opportunity. In that moment I realized that if I didn't draw a line, I would slowly vanish from my own story. I would become a piece of furniture to be moved, a box to be stored, an asset to be liquidated for my own good. Selling the house wasn't revenge. It was reclaiming authorship. Yes, it complicated things for my son and his family. Yes, they had to move, adjust, tighten belts. But they also learned something important, that love doesn't include automatic rights to someone else's sacrifices. That respect doesn't end when a person moves into a smaller bed. In my new apartment, my world is smaller but sharper. I have a balcony with 3 big pots, one for roses, one for herbs, one for whatever Emma wants to try each season. I have neighbors my age who talk to me like a peer, not a responsibility. I can make my own breakfast, choose my own bedtime, lock my own door. Daniel visits on Sundays with the kids. Amber comes too, now, more subdued, more careful. We're not as close as I once imagined we'd be, but there's a new kind of honesty between us. One afternoon, as we sat on my balcony, she said quietly, I didn't realize how I sounded that day when I said we needed the space. I know, I said. If I thought you were cruel, this would be easier. You were tired, overwhelmed, practical, and you live in a world that constantly tells you to maximize everything. Time, money, square footage. But I needed you to remember that I'm not square footage. She nodded, eyes wet. I'm sorry. I forgive you, I said. But I don't regret what I did. And I don't. Because in the end, the house was never just walls and floors. It was a symbol of every invisible thing mothers and fathers pour into their children. Labor, worry, hope. When those children grow up, they're not entitled to the building. They're entitled to the lessons. So if you're watching this and you have an aging parent, remember this. Their life is not extra space you get to repurpose. Their home, even if they leave it, is not automatically yours. Ask, include them. Respect their no as much as you'd respect their yes. And if you're the one in the narrow bed, being talked about like a project, remember that as long as your mind is clear, you still hold the pen. The day my daughter-in-law told me, we need the space, she thought she was closing a chapter. What she didn't realize was that she'd just given me the opening line to write the rest of my story myself.